which is a group that monitors the news for bias, inaccuracy, or other breach of journalistic standards in coverage of the Arab-Israeli conflict. Simon worked in a variety of non-profit organizations in London before coming on Aliyah, and here he's worked for BICOM and as managing editor of NGO Monitor, you'll be hearing more about that later, as well as serving the IDEA spokespersons unit, where he continues to perform reserve duty. Simon has appeared in print and electronic media, both in Israel and in Britain. Simon, over to you.
Thank you. First of all, apologies for being late. Facebook, I hear, is buying Waze for $1 billion. Well, after I use Waze tonight, they can have it for free. So there's any concerns. Now, I'm actually a little bit older than I look, because I actually worked for Gerald at NGO Monitor some 10 years ago now, almost. And in fact, I was actually trained by David Plosker here as a student back in, I think, something like 1996. So Trevor, I think your more recent acquisition, we've worked together in the last year or two, and hopefully we'll say something about that later tonight. So I'm going to take you back a little bit further than that, back to the outbreak of the so-called Second Intifada. I was working as the Public Affairs Officer for the Board of Deputies of British Jews. Now, we used to have a book there where we used to take notes on complaints from the public about the media. And, you know, I'd scribble things down about the BBC, The Guardian. Then, of course, the violence broke out. The terrorism, the media went ballistic against Israel. I threw the book away because I was bombarded with phone calls from irate members of the public. Not just Jews, but anyone who was concerned about Israel. And they kept saying, what are you going to do about the BBC? What are you going to do about The Guardian? And it took me a while, but I realised a little bit later that they were asking the wrong question. Because the question should have been, what can we do about the BBC? What can we do about The Guardian? And this is something I've taken with me into my role as managing editor of Honest Reporting. For those of you who aren't aware, we are the world's largest grassroots media monitoring organisation dealing with Israel, the Arab-Israeli conflict. We have some 150,000 subscribers worldwide. We are active on the internet, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, you name it. And it's a very, very simple model. What do we do? Well, with that amount of subscribers, I'm able to leverage the pressure, because I have one person who sits and spends his entire day looking at all of the English language newspapers around the world, looking for the media bias. And if we see something that is particularly heinous, I will write about it, I will analyse it, and I will send out an alert to all of these subscribers, giving them the details how and where to complain. And in the best case scenario, people actually do take action. The BBC, Guardian, whoever is bombarded with emails and complaints, and it reaches a critical mass, because not only are they having to listen to us, but also it gets out into the mainstream media. It becomes a story in itself that people were very, very upset about what was written about Israel, and there's more pressure on those media outlets. Now, we can discuss a lot more about this model later. I just want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. First of all, I did officer's course in the IDF spokespersons unit a couple of years ago. And apart from the fact it was in Hebrew, which was shocking in itself for me, but the biggest shock I got was the realisation that the IDF, and I can presume that a lot of government organs here, the outside world is not their main focus. For the IDF, their main focus is on the Israeli domestic public. Why? Because unless the Israeli army has the support of the Israeli public, where are we going to be? So everything they did was geared towards support from the Israeli public. And foreign media was a secondary consideration. And I think that's something that a lot of us tend to forget. I mean, I would assume a lot of people here probably get their Israeli news from Leah's colleagues, from the Jerusalem Post, Times of Israel, and of course some of the media outlets that you used to read when you from your original home countries. So that's one thing to think about. Another thing I want to leave you with is you'd be surprised at some of the reasons why journalists sometimes don't like Israel. A colleague of mine took a Scandinavian journalist out for a meal in a kosher meat restaurant, I think it was in Jerusalem. it couldn't have been in Tel Aviv because it's impossible to find a kosher meat restaurant. And they're sitting there discussing all sorts of things, and it got to the end of the meal, at which point the journalist, he lost it. He started screaming about how Israel is a religiously coercive society. Why? Because he couldn't have milk with his tea. Seriously, and that was what got him upset. You would be surprised. I don't want to speak any longer because there's a lot of material we can get through here, a lot of good speakers. I also want to, just before we go, I want to say thank you to these wonderful students here. Quite frankly, I think we all should have just walked off and gone home, because I would have actually loved to hear more about what they got up to in South Africa and anywhere else, and I applaud the IDC for the wonderful work that they're doing as well. With that, I'm going to leave it to our final speaker as well.
Thank you very much, Simon. And last but